Well, goodbyes are always hard and difficult to know what to say, but certainly Libby and I, when we felt the call to full-time ministry, we knew that this was a distinct possibility that you get moved somewhere and then they want to move you somewhere else again. And it's actually interesting, it was when I was working for you, Ross, that I did feel the call to full-time ministry. Well, I answered the call, let's put it that way. And we headed off to Avondale College from Ross's place. And I just want to thank the church this morning for supporting not just me, but my family particularly. As you know, in this job I travelled quite a bit, and Libby and the kids would come along here every week. And this was the place, I've always said to them, whenever we moved, you choose a church where you guys feel comfortable and I'll go along with you. Because one of the main things for me is that they feel comfortable and they're part of a church community and they're growing and their faith is growing as well. And so thank you, church community, for the support that you've offered to my family. The weeks that and the times that I couldn't be here and all the different events, the Pathfinders, and you know, you've all had a bit of experience with Libby's cooking and her health sort of things, and it's good that you can experience some of the passion that I get shared with me at home as well. I also want to thank the men's group, and early on when I just purchased my house that I've been living in, the men's group came around and helped me for a day, and I remember the more grass we cut, the more surprises we found. And it might be worth a drive-by again to have a look. We've been working at it for the last few years, and the inside of the house looks very different, and so does the outside. So yeah, thank you all for your support in so many ways. I was thinking of what to share this morning, and I thought the best thing I could share is a picture of Jesus. And you know, we live with a hope that really this earth is fairly temporary, and that we'll all meet together again sometime in heaven. I just want to thank Nathan for his story, that you shifted our attention to all the big kids' attention to what is to come, and a beautiful picture of the future that we all long for and we all look forward to. And certainly that's the kind of picture I want to point your eyes to today, if I can. And so to get underway, I want to show you a video, and it's a light-hearted video. And I want you to, as you're watching this video, I want you to either write down some notes or take some mental notes of what is being described, the story being described in the video, and how that is similar or different to the same story described in the scriptures. Because it's interesting that we sometimes have pictures in our mind of what something is like, but we don't necessarily have anything to pin it to, but we've gained the picture from somewhere. So I'm going to show you a picture, a video, with some children describing the Christmas story. And I want you to just take some notes, mentally or written, how that's similar or different to the Bible story. So let's see if that works for us, Jason. Has anyone seen that before? No. Similarities, differences to the story. Anyone pick out a few? What was that? The gifts weren't exactly right. Okay, yep. We had some wipes, very important. Yep. Anyone else want to point some out? Donkey and the camel, couldn't quite decide. Yep. Teenage Mary as the belly appeared. Yeah. There's lots of things about the Christmas story that were shared in there, but you might not know, not necessarily contained in the scriptures. And so this time of year we're in a unique position here in our Western society. And secular society actually turns its attention somewhat to the Jesus story. And just about everyone's got some ideas of what it's like, but I guess my big question today, what is the real story? Who is the real Jesus in this story? And so I want to begin by reading from the book of Luke and Luke's account of the birth story. And in Luke chapter 2, Luke picks up this story. Luke was a physician, and he was known for being very particular. He even writes it in his introduction. I'll just let you know, I've asked the eyewitnesses just so I can get this right. And in Luke chapter 2, he begins to describe the birth story. And so, starting at verse 1 in chapter 2, the Bible says, "In those days, Caesar Augustus issued a decree that a census should be taken of the entire Roman world. This was the first census that took place while Quirinius was governor of Syria, and everyone went to his own town to register. So Joseph also went up from the town of Nazareth to Galilee, to Judea, to Bethlehem, the town of David, because he belonged to the house and the line of David. He went there to register with Mary, who was pledged to be married to him and was expecting a child. While they were there, the time came for the baby to be born, and she gave birth to her firstborn, a son, and she wrapped him in cloths and placed him in a manger because there was no room for them at the inn." There are a few things I just want to comment about as we go through the text. And the first one is there was a census taken of the entire Roman world. And the land of Israel was ruled by the Romans, much to the Israelites, God's people's disgust. And so Joseph had to return to his ancestral hometown because Joseph was a descendant of King David. And Bethlehem was King David's hometown. And you might remember the story where the prophet Samuel went out to look for this son of Jesse who was going to be the king. And he's looking through all of the boys. I think there are 11 sons. And he said, he looked at them all and he said, "No, that's not the one. Is there any more?" And they said, "Oh, there's the youngest brother, he's out with the sheep." Well, all of this happened in the area of Bethlehem. This was King David's city. And so David's looking after the sheep in the fields around Bethlehem. And it's important to note, when the Bible writers write, what's included in the text and what's not included in the text. They put anything that's written there is there for a very good reason. Sometimes it takes a while to work out what the good reason is, but if it's there for a reason. And so the writers here, this is Luke, he's included this big, like the first, I think, 4 verses there, telling you all about the lineage of Joseph. And he's trying to make the point here that Joseph is part of King David's line, and therefore when Mary has a baby, it's going to be part of the line of David, because the Bible prophecies were very clear that a Messiah would come who would be from the root of David, from Jesse, follow all the way down. So here Luke's, laying it down here, like all these bits of information about Nazareth. They went from Nazareth to Bethlehem, to David's city, to the house of David. He really makes it clear. And it just casually says there in verse 4 that he travelled from the village of Nazareth to Galilee. Does anyone know how far that is? 135 kilometres. Now, well, it's not quite as far as Launceston from here, but almost. Maybe like Campbelltown. Campbelltown would have to be about that far, I reckon. There's no reference in the Bible of how they travelled there. Did you know that? I've always had in my mind it was like this. Anyone else seen that picture before? Yep. Some of you can probably quote the story to me as well. Clip, clop, when small donkeys hooves. Yeah, anyone got that book at home? Yeah, right. A few people nodding, that's right. In my mind, of course, Mary came on a donkey to Bethlehem. But there is no scriptural evidence at all to say one way or another about how she got all that way from Nazareth to Bethlehem. Maybe she walked. Maybe she did take a donkey. Maybe it was a camel after all. A golf cart camel. Yeah, we don't know. It's all just speculation, but she got there the 135 kilometres. Now in verse 5, Mary was referred to, in some Bibles it might say Joseph's fiancée. Does anyone's Bible say fiancée? Yeah. Mine said something different in verse 5. Mine says he was pledged to be married to her. And this was a bit of a tricky time for Joseph and Mary. Up until this time in Earth's history, there was only one way that ladies had become pregnant. And Joseph rightly assumed that Mary had been with another man because he knew it wasn't him. And the account of the story in the book of Matthew highlights that Joseph was wanting to call off the engagement quietly because he didn't want to disgrace Mary and expose her. And it was only the direct intervention of an angel telling Joseph the full story and directing him to continue the engagement that Joseph actually continued the relationship with Mary. And it would seem even from this far back that Joseph is a guy who is in touch with God. He's open to God's leading. And secondly, he's a man of some honour. And in verse 6, the verse says, I'll read verse 6 here. It says, while they were there, the time came for the baby to be born. I'd always had in my mind that, Mary's on the donkey there, and just gets into Bethlehem, and that night gives birth to a little baby. Anyone else have that picture in their mind? Yeah, I've always had that. But if you look closely at the text here, it says, while they were there, the time came. It doesn't actually indicate whether it was a short amount of time or a long amount of time before they arrived in Bethlehem that the baby was born. I lived in a little bit of fear that Libby and I would be a couple who would birth a baby in the car on the way to hospital. It didn't happen, but twice we only made it by 15 minutes. And so I'm starting to think of some logistics here. What kind of a bloke's Joseph to cart his wife off at 9 months pregnant on a 135 kilometre trip on the back of a donkey? Like, Joseph, what are you thinking, mate? There's some things that aren't necessarily making sense. Anyway, I'll come back to that. In verse 7, the child was born and wrapped in strips of cloth. Again, of all the things the writer could have mentioned here, he talks about the baby being wrapped in strips of cloths. And I'll come to that a little bit later of why I think that's so. And Luke also mentions that he was laid in a manger. And a manger was like some sort of trough that cattle or sheep ate their food out of. Perhaps that might be like, the cloths and the manger might be a bit like today, mentioning, and I'm looking over at the midwives amongst us, might be mentioning that the baby was wrapped in a stripy blanket and placed in a cot that had glass sides and steel wheels on the bottom. Does that sound like a fair description? Yeah, that's kind of what it is. And so maybe it's a bit like common language, wrapped in cloths and laying in a manger. And I'll share some more with you why I think that's true. And the Bible gives the reason there right at the end of verse 7, and they placed him in a manger because there was no room for them in the inn. Now, does anyone else's Bible have a different words beside inn? No room at the lodgings. Okay. There are a number of things on this story that intrigue me and very deeply. You know, Joseph is returning to his hometown, the town where all his ancestors come from. Now, when I return to my hometown is Bega in New South Wales, where the cheese comes from. I am somewhat known, not because I'm famous or infamous, either of those, but when I go home, people pretty quickly can work out where I fit in. Oh, you're Rex's son. Oh, you're Cyril's grandson. They place me in the family, in the lineup. They also know how to spell my name, my surname. That's a very rare thing. And pronounce it as well, which is it's quite unique. And what I'm saying here by explaining this is that I find it very hard to believe that Joseph would be able to arrive in Bethlehem and to just slip in unnoticed. In fact, I would say that it would be impossible for that to happen. Further to this, Joseph lived in a communal culture as opposed to an individualistic culture. Now, we today live in the West in a very individualistic culture. While everything in our culture is centred around the rights of the individual, communal cultures centre around families and communities. Now, since we have some Cook Islanders here, I'll mention island culture. Island cultures are built on communal culture, and it's still strong today. Am I telling the truth? I wish your mum was here. I'd pick on her. Harpy's here, is she? Yeah, there she is. She's waving. Am I saying the right thing here? Communal cultures, Harpy? Island cultures are communal cultures. Yeah, they are. This means that individuals can act in ways that either bring honour or shame to their family. And you always want to bring honour to the family. Is that right? Yeah, you want to bring honour to the family. Everything you do. Honour and shame cultures value things like hospitality. You don't ever want to run out of food at a family important event. Is that right? What would happen if I ran out of food at, say, a wedding? Shame. Oh yes, cover your face. That's right, shame. Communal cultures value family, respect, community, generosity, purity, loyalty and patronage. You know, family's a big thing. I went to, I studied at Avondale with quite a few different island cultures, like people from island cultures. And I went around to share some notes with another student, or I can't remember what, but I dropped into his house unannounced. And I couldn't work out why he was trying to feed me. And I was just thinking I'm thinking like an individual Westerner. I'm just giving you some notes, or I can't remember, swapping a book or something. It was something simple. And he was busy trying to sit me down and feed me a meal. And I left trying to grapple with what was happening. Here was a clash of the two cultures coming together. In his culture, you know, a guest you have to look after and feed. But in a Western culture, that was just dropping a book off. Some of the differences. Joseph came from this communal culture, and so he's turned up with Mary in his hometown, his ancestral hometown. He's got a heavily pregnant wife. There are no lodgings available. What would be the honourable thing to do for the extended family to do? What would be the honourable thing?
Make room.
Invite them in. It would be a travesty to, throw them out somewhere. You know, just imagine if there was a Cook Island family came to Hobart today and the wife was heavily pregnant and they had nowhere to go. We couldn't send them out to the back shed. It'd be shame. They'd have to, God forbid, even in the individualistic culture, that would be a hard one to swallow. Someone would invite them in, take them in. And for this reason, I would like to propose another way to interpret the text. Joseph and Mary made the trip to Bethlehem, perhaps weeks, maybe even a bit longer, prior to the birth of baby Jesus. And upon arrival, they found no lodgings, and because of that, they were actually invited into the house of a close family member of Joseph, and it was here that baby Jesus was born. So let me show you a couple of diagrams of houses from that time. Here's a side view of what is considered a typical house, all right? The door at the bottom left, and there's a lower part, and then you go up some stairs to an upper part, one big room. There's no bit sectioned off. Let me go to the next one. Here it is from the top view, same house. On the bottom left, there's the door again, and there's a stable on the left. And remember, that was a bit lower, that part. And because it was a bit lower, they had some mangers that were sort of cut into the floor in the upper section. So the taller animals, like a cow or a donkey, could go over, and just at the right sort of height, they could just reach into the little dugout parts there, the mangers, and they could eat their feed. And the rest of the family stayed up in the family room where the rest of the living happened. The animals in the stable were blocked from climbing the stairs, and they were down, so they couldn't just jump up into the main part of the house. And there were two reasons why they were kept in the stable, kept inside the house like that. One was for security. Didn't want anyone taking off with your prized animals. And the second one was that in winter, it would actually provide warmth to the house. Now, we won't mention the smell as well, but certainly that was very common, the common people's kind of house. They didn't have big fancy houses. That was the kind of house they would have lived in. And a house like this fits with the birth narrative of Jesus. Let me just reference another couple of other places where they had houses of this kind, and I'll draw back on some of your Bible knowledge. And if you haven't heard these stories before, you can look them up. Other places in the Bible, Judges chapter 11. Saul, the king of Israel, goes and visits the witch of Endor. You might remember, a bit of an interesting story. And after a conversation with the witch, he's feeling, this is Judges chapter 11, he's feeling ill, and the lady goes to prepare a meal for him. And she goes all out and kills the fatted calf, which is a very honourable sort of thing to do. And in 1 Samuel, I might have my verses wrong here, but anyway, 1 Samuel 28 verse 24, the King James Version says, "And the woman had a fat calf in the house, and she hastened and killed it." In the stable part at the bottom, she kept the fatted calf. Another story, a bit of a grisly story, this one, is a reference to a house. This one's in the book of Judges. I had my verses mixed up there, sorry. We're in Judges 11 now. Jephthah vows if he got victory in battle, you might remember, he says, "I will sacrifice the first thing that comes out of my house." And I always thought, he's crazy. Why would he sacrifice the first thing that comes out of his house? I'm thinking about my kind of house. I'm thinking of my wife and 4 kids. That's likely to come out of my house. The reason he could say that is because I believe he had a house like this with a stable at the bottom, and what he was expecting is as he got home, out would come, his prized cow or his prized sheep. But lo and behold, his daughter came out of the house to greet him. And the story comes to a very sad end. But the point I'm trying to make is he wouldn't make a vow like that unless he had a house that was similar to this. And further, Jesus makes reference in Luke chapter 13 where he heals a woman on the Sabbath, and the ruler of the synagogue, he's at the synagogue when he heals her, he criticises her. Jesus criticises him. Why do you do that? You've healed her on the Sabbath. And this is Jesus' reply in Luke chapter 13 and verse 15. But the Lord replied, you hypocrites, each of you works on the Sabbath day. Don't you untie your ox or your donkey from its stall on the Sabbath and lead it out for water from the cut down stable? Jesus knew that everyone had one small room in their house, and the animals had to come out from the stable part each morning. And further to that, there was never any rebuttal recorded from the religious leader. He wasn't saying, well, no, I don't. He just went along with Jesus. Further, making the point that the houses were probably like this. So why the mention of the inn or the lodgings in Jesus' birth story in Luke chapter 2 and verse 7 then, if the house is like this? In the story, I want to talk about inns for a minute. In the story of the Good Samaritan. You might remember at the end of the story, the Good Samaritan takes the injured man where? He took him to the inn, that's right. And the Greek word is pandochion. But here in Luke chapter 2, where we're talking about the Jesus story, the word inn is kataluma. Two very separate words. And kataluma is the same word used when the disciples were looking for somewhere to eat the Last Supper. Do you remember where they ended up going? The upper room, okay? That's the same word, kataluma, as used in Luke chapter 2 as the upper room story, same word. And the upper room, as you know, was the guest room of a private house. So here in Luke chapter 2, in the story of Jesus' birth, we find Jesus being placed in a manger in the family room of a home because the guest room of the house was already full. So let me show you another drawing. Sometimes people would add a guest room to their house. And you can see there's the same house and then the guest room out to one end. And so Joseph and Mary have arrived. The guest room on the house is full. So what did the family do? Invited them in to the family living room area. And that is where, I believe, Mary gave birth to baby Jesus. Now the story moves on a bit, and I want to ask you a question. How would you expect to welcome a royal baby? Today, if you had to go and welcome a royal baby, what sort of things do you think you might do? Shorts and t-shirt? Probably not. Dress up pretty nice. Take some gifts. If there was a royal baby born in Hobart, where would we, where might we find this royal baby? Where's that? Government House. Oh, I'm with you, Elizabeth, there. Yeah, enter through the Botanic Gardens or something and then make your way up to Government House. It would be something, we'd expect something, wouldn't we? Something quite royal. Here's a royal picture. Anyone know who's in this royal picture? Come on, call it out. A baby, a little, I think it's a little prince. I think I could have my photos mucked around a bit here. I think there's three children in the family. Is that right? I don't know which one it is. George, let's just say it's George. Now, for all the mothers who've given birth, is this how you exited the hospital? Dressed up in your beautiful designer dress, smiling for the camera, holding your perfect little baby. One of these photos was taken 7 hours after delivery. I think it was this one, 7 hours after delivery. Don't know that me and Libby could have pulled off one of those photos after 7 hours quite, could we? Probably not. Quite spectacular. But here's a royal baby. If we went to see the royalty today, we'd expect some kind of, like this, designer clothes, the baby wrapped snugly in some kind of, maybe golden capsule or something. I don't know. Like, we'd expect, government house, paparazzi snapping photos. If you read on, you can see how it happened at Jesus' birth from verse 8. So in chapter 2, verse 8, and there were shepherds living out in the fields nearby, keeping watch over their flocks at night. An angel of the Lord appeared to them, and the glory of the Lord shone around them, and they were terrified. But the angel said to them, "Do not be afraid. I bring you good news of great joy that will be for all the people. Today in the town of David, a Saviour has been born to you. He is Christ the Lord. This will be a sign to you. You will find a baby wrapped in cloths and lying in a manger." Suddenly a great company of the heavenly host appeared, and the angels praising God and saying, "Glory to God in the highest, and on earth peace to men, and on whom his favour rests." When the angels had left them and gone into heaven, the shepherds said to one another, "Let's go to Bethlehem and see this thing that has happened, which the Lord has told us about." So they hurried off and found Mary and Joseph and the baby, who was lying in the manger. When they had seen him, they spread the word concerning what had been told about this child. And all who heard were amazed with what the shepherds said to them. But Mary treasured up all these things and pondered them in her heart. The shepherds returned, glorifying and praising God for all the things they had heard and seen, which were just as they had been told. Shepherds were poor. Shepherds were lowly. And being a shepherd at this time, you were considered like that was like a very entry kind of level job. But the first to be informed of the birth of baby Jesus were a group of shepherds. Then the angel visits the shepherds and gives them the news. And I want you to notice exactly what the message is. Firstly, don't be afraid. I bring you good news that will bring great joy to all people. What a message. And the shepherds were told to go and visit the baby. And being the lowliest in society and being told to go visit the Messiah, the Prince King, I imagine would have likely caused some anxiety for these poor shepherds. They couldn't rush home and put on their best clothes. They were already wearing the only set of clothes that they had. And so the angel gave them a sign that I believe, would have helped to calm their nerves and their anxiety. The sign was this, that you'll find a baby wrapped in cloths lying in a manger. And at first it sounds like a really strange sign. But in the village of Bethlehem, being not very big, and it would have been highly unlikely that there was more than one newborn baby in that town at that time. As well as this, it was the regular practice in the day amongst the common people to wrap their newborns in strips of cloth so the baby's hands are wrapped up. And I think I used to wrap my kids up, wrap their hands up so they couldn't move. And this was a similar way. The common people used to wrap their babies in strips of cloths, and again, it wouldn't be uncommon for them to put their baby in the manger. A little hollowed out bit, the baby can't roll out, or there was sometimes a lower wooden trough that like sheep might use that could be used to put a baby in as well. And so the shepherds, hearing this, would have clicked in their mind straight away, hang on a minute, we're not heading to some big mansion somewhere. We're not looking for a golden cot and silk gowns. The King of the universe will be found in a common person's home, amongst the common people. And the shepherds, after seeing baby Jesus, they go into Bethlehem and find him. They go out and they tell everyone everything they had seen and heard. And clearly they found the situation suitable for a newborn, because in their culture of honour and shame, if they found this newborn and mother and parents, in some back room, shut in with a bunch of animals with nowhere else to go, they would have ushered Mary and Joseph out themselves and brought them into their own home. You know, on a side note, Matthew records in his birth story that we find the wise men entering the house. That's his quote. The wise men entered the house to see baby Jesus. And all of this, I believe, points to a very clear story that this was the kind of house that Jesus was born in, with two loving parents with him and a wider extended family there for support. Cared for by the local community. You know, I think there are many things we could take from this story, but perhaps I could suggest just a few, and I'd like to base them on the words of the angel to the shepherds. Don't be afraid. I bring you good news that will bring great joy to all people. And this time of year is very unique in Australia. A secular society that largely wants nothing to do with Jesus just has this little opening to talking about and singing about a little baby that came and completely changed the course of human history. And people around us in our society have all these different ideas of what Jesus was like. But the Bible very clearly says that Jesus was made himself vulnerable in every way. He came to the earth as a little baby, helpless and fully reliant on others. He lived a perfect life, died a horrible, cruel death, and on the third day rose again for the sole purpose of saving the human race. And because of that, you and I have the opportunity of eternal life in a world free from sin, just like you talked about. Thank you, Nathan. And a life connected with Jesus in heaven. And this truly is good news. And when believed and taken to heart, it really does bring true peace and, like the angel said, great joy. The other thing I wanted to pick out and point out this morning is that when Jesus was born, he came for people like the shepherds, poor, lowly and rejected. But he also came for the wise men too, the rich and the learned, because those guys also came and worshipped him too, bringing their expensive gifts. 3 gifts: gold, frankincense and myrrh. Were there 3 wise men? We don't know, but there were definitely 3 gifts. You know what? The good news is not exclusive. It's not just for a segment of our society. It's for everyone. For you and me, for our neighbours, for our political leaders, for refugees, for successful business people, for academics, for those who have little or no education. Jesus is for all people. And so whatever opportunities you get this Christmas to share the true story of Jesus, share it. In the busyness over the year end, when our society stops for Christmas, I want to challenge you to take time to genuinely get acquainted with the real Jesus. Because the message of Jesus is good news. It truly does bring great joy. And Jesus is for all people. Let's sing together as we close today. We've got one more song.